Hey, welcome to episode number 2 from MXWrencher.com. Dirt Bike Mike here along with Corvinator. Corvinator, what are we going to be doing today to help these guys out on their bikes?
All right, first thing we're going to do today is we're going to change the oil and filter on this KX450. I know it's a Cowie, but we'll go ahead and work on it.
Are these things fixable?
Yeah, they're fixable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. I'm not sure.
Duct tape, zip ties, that kind of thing.
I didn't even know there was anything other than Yamaha dirt bike, so it's good to know. So we're going to do an oil change. Now, let me ask you this. Last week, you know, you had to get all geared up. You're going to have to put your gear on to do this video or what?
No gear needed for this.
No gear needed. Hey, this is a bonus video here, right?
Right,
Easy.
exactly.
All right, man, let's jump into it. Do an oil change.
All right, let's get started. All right, the first most important thing you need to do is refer to your owner's manual for the bike that you have. Different manufacturers have different motor designs. Okay, they take different fasteners and what have you. So always refer to your owner's manual, different oil capacities, all that kind of thing.
Okay, and I see you got some stuff laid out here. So what are some of the tools and stuff we're going to need, and what are you going to be using here?
Okay, rubber gloves, very important. For me, keeps all the chemicals and oil away from your skin. Screwdriver, T-handle with an 8mm on it, and a 14mm socket.
Okay, and we're going to be using that carb choke cleaner there?
We're going to have carb cleaner, and we also need to use a measuring cup. I'm using a Ratio Right, so we make sure we get the right capacity of oil in there.
Looks simple enough.
All right, the first thing you want to do is you want to get an oil drain pan, preferably not the pan from the kitchen sink. Make sure you have a big enough one that when you pull the drain plug out and it spews a little bit, which it may, it's not going to go all over your garage floor, all right? Okay, on some bikes you have a guard under here. On this Cowie, you don't have to take this off. Yamahas, you do. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the big one, and then I'm going to loosen the smaller one too, and drain them at the same time. All right, once you have the drain bolts out, the oil's draining, you want to make sure that you take your fill cap loose so it helps all the oil come out and drain. Okay, and you always want to make sure that you tip the bike straight up and down. So you see, as I do this, some more oil will come out. Yeah. Okay, you're getting more contaminants out of your motor when you do that. Okay. All right. Another thing I like to do is before I change the oil filter, I keep my drain plug and my cap off. Okay. When I take the oil filter out, sometimes there can be some oil stuck in an oil cavity that can also drain when you have the drain bolts out. Okay, you always want to keep in mind, it's a good rule of thumb, tighten everything at the same time. Try not to do too many steps too many different times. That way you make sure everything gets tightened at the same time. All right, so on the Kawasaki, the oil filter is located right here on the right side of the bike. There's 2 bolts for this. They're 8mm. Now, one thing you're going to notice is the bolts are different sizes, different thread patterns. You always want to make sure that you put those back in the right spots. These oil filter caps, they're O-ring sealed. You just got to work it off. You don't want to rush this too much or hammer, take a hammer and hammer on the side of it or anything of the sort. Okay, so we got the cap off. You need to take the oil filter out. However you need to do that, you just want to make sure you don't puncture anything if you use a tool to get this filter out. Now, one thing to remember, all oil filters are directional. They have to go in a certain way because of the way that it's designed inside of the filter. And there's typically always a spring with that too, okay? So make sure you take these out in the right manner and put them back in the right direction as well.
Okay, so there's a little bit of residual oil left inside there, so we need to get that out as well, right?
Right. You can use a paper towel, a rag, but you want to make sure that you don't put anything else in this, because this is part of the motor. You don't want to put anything in any kind of hole that's going to leave some type of fuzz or anything that can plug an oil passage.
Okay, all right, makes sense.
Okay, so paper towels will soak it up enough to where it's clean enough to go.
Okay. Okay, now this doesn't look like the oil filter that I used to put in my bike. They were much more paper looking. It looks similar, but this is an aftermarket one, it looks like, that Scott has purchased. So this was not one we're going to throw away and replace. We're going to clean this one, right?
What it does is you can clean it with contact cleaner every time you change your oil. You don't have to buy an oil filter every time you change your oil.
Got it.
Yeah, one thing about these metal mesh oil filters is in the corners there's a collection of fibers, metal pieces basically. You always want to make sure you clean that out as much as possible.
That's the stuff that does the damage to the engine, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can get it stuck in a small little piece of bearing someplace in the motor, and it'll grenade your motor. Yeah, you pull a pin and you stick the grenade right inside the combustion chamber. And your crank comes out the bottom of the cases.
We do not at mxwrencher.com endorse grenading your motor.
All right, at this point, what I want to point out here is different manufacturers have different designs of all kinds of different things. Yamaha's have an oil tank up here, which has a screen in the bottom of it. It's very important to remove that and clean that off. One thing that has happened over the years is when you get a lot of debris like these particles at the bottom of that screen when the oil comes out of the tank, that will restrict your oil flow, which in turn restricts how much oil gets to certain parts of your motor. Very, very expensive. Okay, so make sure you're doing all the steps that your owner's manual talks about. Okay, the next thing we want to do is you want to clean your cap too, because the cap has oil passages in it. Okay, and if you can see here, you see all the black little gunk coming out of here. Now those are small particles, but you always just want to make for sure that there's nothing plugging any of these holes. Okay. Okay, so we're ready to get back together with all our nuts, bolts, oil, and that kind of thing. One thing you want to remember is these bolts are steel. They're steel threads. You're going into a case that's aluminum. The biggest misconception is you need to have things as tight as you can get it. Don't over tighten these things, because in order to repair that, it's going to be very expensive, and you can't do that in your garage, or you have to buy new cases if it's that extensive of damage, and that's very expensive. So make sure you get the right torque on it. Another thing guys worry about when they're replacing their drain plugs is the washer on the drain plug. It is a good idea to replace those every so often because they're kind of a crush washer, but you don't have to do it every time.
Now, how do you know how tight to put that on there? Just because you've been doing it for so long, what do you recommend? You just snug?
Yeah, you can get a torque wrench at Sears or a tool store. It is a good idea to do that kind of thing on smaller bolts, because those are the ones that you're going to damage the threads on. And once you get the feel of it, you'll know how snug you need to have it. Okay, so we're going back in with the oil filter. We want to make sure that it's going in the correct direction. Okay. Sometimes your filter will have an arrow on it. This one does not, but I know from taking it out which direction.
So it's important to remember.
On this here, you can see the two O-rings. It's very, very, very important that these things are in good shape, okay? If they're too loose or they've swollen, like this one, what you need to do is you need to replace it, okay? Because it's going to get in the way of these two mating surfaces, and you're going to cut it, slice it, break it, and then it ain't going to do its job.
Okay.
So we're going to replace these. So we're putting a new O-ring on, which I've kind of put a little bit of oil on there to help with the sealant of it. Use the correct torque on the torque wrench, or once you get the feel of it, just make sure that they're snug. So if you haven't done so already, you're going to see in your owner's manual engine oil capacity, and it's going to give you 3 different options. Okay, you always want to do your oil filter. Now the measuring tool we're going to use today is called a ratio right. Our manual says we need 0.98 liters. Okay, transfer that into milliliters. It's 980. Transfer it into cc's, it's the same deal, 980 cc's. You can use a funnel as well. I just always use the ratio right. I guess I'm a pretty good aim. All right, so we got the oil in there. We're ready to go back with our filter cap, all right?
Yep.
Voila, all done. Ready to go hit the track.
Simple enough.
Here we go.
I just have one question before we get started. I know on our first video, you put your gear on. Are you going to need to put your gear on for this one too? Hey, welcome to episode number 2. That's dos if you're Spanish. mxwrencher.com.
Dude, we ain't going to get damn thing done today. Dos.